Hey everybody, today we are going to be talking about my favorite films of the year so far. So basically anything that came out between January 2024 and the end of June. It tends to be the case that a lot of my favorite films of the year come out more in the latter half of the year, but you know, that doesn't matter. There are still some really interesting films so far that I'd like to talk about. I have 5 films here and it was actually tough to narrow it down to just that, but yeah, all of these movies that I'm about to talk about, I have reviews for them, so you can always just go look those up. Oh, and these are going to be in no particular order, but let's start with The Beast. This film, it's a French film and it's directed by Bertrand Bonello. And, you know, people who watch my channel regularly know I am a huge fan of his, even though he can be a little bit tricky at times to understand. He has a very postmodern experimental style that honestly, to me, has more in common with like art installations. Even though he's very interested in pastiche, he's also, you know, he has a very modern point of view as well. There's a digital sort of feeling, in particularly in this movie, but I would say in all of his movies. But this movie feels almost like a digital image that is being downloaded, but it's still rendering, just like as we're watching it. His films are like this, you know, kind of hall of mirrors type of experience that I've talked about so far as just weird distortions, time and continuity, that all factors into the experience. Almost a cubist mentality, I feel like. The Beast, in my opinion, is maybe the most ambitious film that I've ever seen from Bonello, and I've still only seen it one time, so I still question whether or not the ambition, kind of that swing from the fences sort of mentality, actually serves more the universal themes that are at the center of it, which tend to be quite intimate. But I love the idea behind this. I love that this is a singular love story that is told throughout multiple time periods and always told, you know, with the same actors playing the roles. You see how environment, time, place, all of that factors into the way that we view the opposite sex, the way that we are able to approach the opposite sex in an attraction, dating situation. How we're often caged by our social expectations, and that inherently muffles the human experience and what is, you know, the cornerstone of the human experience. It is love. There's also a very technological angle to this film. AI plays a part in the plot for sure, and yet that portion of the film I feel like I'd like to re-examine for sure, just because it felt maybe the most underdeveloped, at least on an initial viewing. And some of the symbols to me can be a little bit overworked at times in Bonello films, but at the same time, the meticulousness and the creativity of his films always gets me. I've said this before, but often my opinions on Bonello films depend on that second viewing, but in particular the third viewing. And, you know, like I said, I've only seen this film one time, so that's unfortunate. But so far as, you know, all the movies that I have seen this year, this is the one I return to so far as like the cerebral impact it had on me. It's also the one that challenged me the most, and it's the one that I am most looking forward to seeing again. So yeah. Next on my list is Furiosa, and this is directed by George Miller. I loved this movie. Obviously, those of you who saw my review know I loved this movie, and I was really surprised by it. It bombed, of course, and with reflection, that does make more sense to me than it initially did, but yeah, when I was watching this movie in the theater, the day that it came out, you know, I was thinking to myself, as cheesy as it is, I was like, this is why we go to the movies. This is the reason. These epic transportive sort of experiences that are perfect for the summer blockbuster season. I feel like I have not had a really big, like classic summer blockbuster type of experience in the movie theater in a long time. I mean, the only one I can think of last year was Across the Spider-Verse. You know, which visually just blew my fucking mind, and I won't shut up about it. But from the live action perspective, last year we had Barbenheimer, but I almost don't count that as a typical summer blockbuster type of experience, just because it's like, yeah, Barbie felt more like the grand spectacle MGM musicals from the 1950s, and then Oppenheimer, it felt more like a December release, like an Academy Award type of for your consideration sort of thing that they were disguising as a summer blockbuster. But as I was watching Furiosa, I was like, this is the one. This is the one that I have been waiting for, that big, you know, live action type of experience. And no, it's very different from Fury Road, which felt, you know, stripped down to its most climactic sections. Here we're expanding and we're going more for like the grand hero's journey odyssey. So it's definitely going to be a bit slower, and we're absorbing all of the worlds a lot more. And I tend to really love that type of filmmaking. Sure, there are moments where I struggle with maybe the pacing and the tension at certain points, but just as an overall experience, I think George Miller is an extraordinary visionary, and his commitment, his confidence when it comes to the environments, to the weapons. Every line, every shot, it contributes to the entire mosaic. And yeah, I know a lot of people complained about the CGI in the film, and I understand to a degree what they are saying, and I agree with you, especially when you do compare it to Fury Road, which obviously combined practical and CGI in the most brilliant way. And yet there's another part of me that leaned into it. I think stylistically it works because it does feel quite committed to that visual style. It almost felt like each frame was like a manga. Is it cartoonish? Yes, but again, when you think about the entire world, it's like I buy into it. It did feel like a fantasy novel cover, or like like Conan the Barbarian, the movie poster. Valhalla Rising, I've mentioned. I just love the bravado, that Nordic sort of grit, the auteur spirit of it all, the balls to really go here. Yeah, maybe it bombed, but I don't know. I think this movie is going to find an audience. I can see it becoming, potentially a cult classic. Next on my list, I'm going with Evil Does Not Exist, and this was directed by Ryusuke Yamaguchi. Yeah, this film to me was so close to being an absolute masterpiece. I was hypnotized by this film. His ability to observe maybe the most simple, the most mundane of human behaviors, but using all of that to, craft an entire mood where you feel the weight of existence at the base of it. It's extraordinary. And what better place to explore all of that than in nature? Like the thorn that is at the root of the flower. There is a brutality and a feeling of survival in this movie, and yet it's all just kind of in stillness. It sort of echoes through the air. You rarely see it in any aggressive sort of way. This is a very Japanese type of fable, so naturally there's going to be a lot of symbolism in the film, and yet all of these symbols, or most of them I should say, felt very rooted in the ground, which I'm not used to. Most of the time when you have a lot of this, it feels like it's kind of just floating above all of the characters as concepts that are never tangible. But in the third act of the film, you start to see more of the abruptness to all of that structure, especially through the editing. And I wasn't really sure how I felt about that. Particularly the climax. I understand kind of the distortion, dreamy as it may be. It just feels off to me. It feels poorly executed. Just didn't feel like it built properly. When you look at the first half of the film, it's like there's layering in of all of the details. There's just something in the second half that isn't quite as resonant for me. So it feels like this gorgeous poetic fable that's just kind of stumbling at the end of it, and that is very frustrating. I could not stop thinking about the ending to this film, and maybe I will change my mind. Maybe after I've seen it a third time, maybe a fourth time, I might like it, but as of now, yeah, it's a bit of a struggle. That said, like I said, I think this is one of the best films of the year. I think it's a near masterpiece, and I truly could watch it over and over again, despite my big problem in that third act. Next, I am going with Kinds of Kindness, and this is directed by Yorgos Lanthimos. And I don't know, I feel like, I think most people who have seen the movie can tell. Yorgos is clearly returning to a style that made him quite famous, more that stilted, disconnected Kubrickian style. So it is going to be more like The Lobster in style, and maybe less like The Favorite. And I admit I am more of a fan of films like The Favorite and Poor Things from Yorgos. But regardless, this film is still incredibly interesting to me, obviously. The movie is 3 stories told in one movie, and yeah, it's like this weird theater company, like a weird traveling theater company of the absurd, where you have all of these different actors, and they're playing different roles that you give them. And because it is Yorgos Lanthimos, of course, it is going to be very satirical in nature, highlighting a lot of the formalities contrasted with, maybe the brutality or awkwardness of the human nature. Particularly with this film, it felt like Lanthimos was observing patients in a psych ward, as if it's like he has 5 different people and he's giving them all of these different scenarios, social situations that they are playing with. So it's like he looks at each patient as interchangeable templates. And so I really like the idea behind all of that. But my problem is that within each mini story, I felt like I wanted each one to be expanded upon so it could be, a feature. It just feels like he has explored a lot of these themes here with more depth and more creativity than he is here. It's also a very long film, and it is not easily palatable. There are going to be people that absolutely hate it and have no idea, what's going on, and others that are really going to connect with it. I personally am one of the people that does connect with it, even though I don't know if I'm fully on its on its side. And finally, on my list, we have The Bike Riders, and this is directed by Jeff Nichols. Now, is this my favorite Jeff Nichols film? No. It's actually probably my least favorite Jeff Nichols film, at least of the ones that I have seen. But, you know, I still consider Nichols to be an outstanding filmmaker, you know, even when he's a little bit unfocused. And this film did not feel as driven by any internal kineticism so much as it did like an external artificiality. And yet I still found it to be a solid film and intriguing in ways that majority of American films just aren't these days. Maybe I am biased, but I don't know. I appreciate Nichols' very solid nod to the classicist style of filmmaking, and with this film, he's clearly influenced by a movie like Goodfellas so far as movement and so far as just like the characters interacting and all of that, but the central driving force behind it does feel a little bit faulty, unlike Goodfellas. This film dares to be like an examination of America through the different generations and how it changes, and obviously there's going to be like a lens with which we're seeing the romanticism of all of that, but I feel like it was a little bit too dependent on that romanticism. All of the individual pieces here are so intriguing. The characters are very intriguing, and the writing is intriguing. I just wanted it to go so much further. There are some really good performances here. As an example, Jodie Comer I think is really great, and I think Tom Hardy is fantastic. I'm a big fan of his. And just constantly throughout the film, it's like I could sense a real potential. I kept thinking about it for a while afterwards because yes, there is a melancholia and like a weight to all the facets. You can feel it. It's just not fully realized. And while yes, that is frustrating, I also can't deny that, you know, I enjoyed it more than most of the American films this year, at least. Again, we are only halfway through the year, so let me know what some of your favorite films are and let me know what I need to still see. But that is my video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist, I do commissioned portraits, and I sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below, and if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are great. Guys, thank you so much for your support and welcome to all the new members. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.